This is Audio Gyan, and I am your host Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. In feature films, the director is God. In documentary films, God is the director. Alfred Hitchcock. Welcome to this two-part series with Jan Schmidt Garre. First part is about making a documentary, and second part is his latest documentary on late architect B.V. Doshi called The Promise, Architect B.V. Doshi. Jan Schmidt is a founder of Pars Media. He founded it in 1988. It's a production company for high-quality documentaries and feature films with a focus on, I would say, creative fields, but classical music, dance, and fine arts. His films have been broadcasted over 30 countries, and Jan has studied philosophy. And the first part is, I hope, going to be all philosophy. And I've linked all his work in the show notes, so please check it out. And welcome, Jan, to Audio Gyan. It's a real honor to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Awesome. So I got interested because as I started before the recording, I said about Audio Gyan has always been dominantly on documenting Indian designers and artists, but I have done few episodes definitely with people who have some sort of an Indian connect, and that's why I thought I'll just reach out to you, understand the B.V. Doshi aspect of it also, but since you're giving your precious time, I thought I'll ask a few questions around documentaries, which is kind of the first part.
Yes, please. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and obviously your documentaries have been around dance music, which is kind of a similar genre in which Audio Gyan deals with. So I wanted to start off with how true are things. I'm starting on a very philosophical note, but how true are things if they are not documented anywhere? Because in India, we had always like a oral tradition, and with the printing press and things like that, people started generally giving more authority or some sort of a recognition if it's written, if it's documented. So at a meta level, what's your reading about the whole documentation aspect of things?
Well, I get your point, and of course, no. In German, the German poet Goethe, he said you only see what you know, and I think that's a little bit what you're referring to, or the direction that you're going at. But I wouldn't go so far. I mean, I think facts are facts without someone documenting them, and of course, the perspective changes when you know more about it, and when your actual experience is enriched by what you read and what you heard and what you know about the phenomenon. But I don't overestimate the role of the documentarist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I mean, why don't you shoot it that why don't you completely agree with what this person said? Why is it not what you see is real?
No, what you see is real. It's enhanced by what you know. So Goethe said you only see what you know, and I think there is even a travel agency using this as a pitch line, as a promotional line, trying to sell their guides. But
got it. So how do you define what to be documented? I mean, everything can be documented, right? So maybe also if you want to take a step back and also would like to share, how do you define public or private while documenting?
Well, honestly, when I'm at work and I'm coming with my team and with the cameras, everything is public, because the reality is changing anyway through the presence of the camera, and I'm not doing that secretly, so the people know that there's a camera, and from that moment on, everything is public. And I hope for the trust of the people that I'm working with, that they know, or that they trust me, and that they rely on myself not misusing what I'm getting. And I think you can use almost everything that you film, as long as you put it in the right context and in the right moment in the film. And I'm just saying this for general, out of general considerations. I myself, as a director, I'm not so interested in the so-called private moments. I'm not the private life. Let's say I did a lot of films on musicians and on performing artists and so on, and their private life is of no interest for me. The private life, in the sense of who are they related with or whatever, how do they live, I don't care. But if there's a chance, or if there's the opportunity that I film something so-called private, I will try to put it in the right context. And most of the times I will not use it. Recently I filmed someone, I don't mention who it was, and all of a sudden he how do you call it? He prepared a joint, yeah, and then he said, yeah, you're not using this, and I said, of course. What do you think? I will not present this in public. I'm not an asshole, you know, but anyway, I think the most intimate moments are not the moments when people are smoking a joint or having their together with their families. I think the most intimate moments are when they are really in the situation, in the flow of their work. And this is what, of course, attracts me a lot when I'm portraying artists, that I can witness those moments of real flowing in art production. And then those people forget the camera, and they forgot me, and they forget everything, because they're totally immersed in what they're creating. And that's, of course, the most beautiful moments.
But then do you also, I mean, yeah, it's a little naive question, but do you just mentioned, right, when the camera is on, everything is public. So there could be a sense of pretense, or something might be going at sometimes at a superficial level. So, like, how do you spot it, or like what happens there? Or it's very rare in your case of the kind of people and the subjects that you choose?
You mean that the reality that I'm encountering is not really satisfying? I'm not sure I got it.
Yeah. So what happens is, typically when the camera is on, people are conscious. People are not themselves.
Yeah.
Really are. So how do you sort of have that cusp where they are still getting into the flow, but they are not yet, because of the camera and everything?
Yes, well, of course, that's a problem I encounter always. One thing is time. After some time, they will relax, and they will forget me, and they will forget what they prepared and how they wanted to look good and all of that. And then, of course, there are also some tricks. Often you get the most beautiful sentences after the official part. And when by chance the camera is still running, it might be good. That's not, I don't mean that I'm betraying these people, because they will see the end result anyway. But then it might be more authentic, more relaxed, more unfiltered.
Correct. Yeah, even I notice this most of the time when I'm sorry. I notice this most of the time when after the recording we have some conversation in which I wish that, oh, this was part of the episode.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
I had an interesting experience in that direction. I just did some interviews with orchestra musicians, and I wanted them. It was an orchestra mixed of all nations, all languages. Very, very beautiful project, and I wanted those people to speak in their native tongues. And strangely, they had big difficulties to speak in their native tongues. But there were people speaking Russian, German, English, Chinese, and so, for instance, the Chinese guy tried to say something, and then I said, "Oh, I almost forgot my mother tongue. I so rarely speak in that language. It's difficult for me to express those things." And then he did it somehow, and I asked him to summarize it just briefly in English, and that was so much better. So I thought that's also an interesting trick. You let them speak in their native tongue, and then when they summarize it, you get the real take.
Oh, interesting. Okay, nice. Yeah. Cool. So again, just taking a step back of not you particularly, but from your learnings of making documentaries, like how objective this process should be, right? Because you'll always have your own biases, you'll always have the legacy, and yeah, it's always there's finally someone who's objectively trying to do, but the person who's doing is the subject also. So how
Yes.
objective this documentation should be or could be?
Well, first of all, this is not such a high value for me. So I don't mind that I'm biased and that I'm coloring what I'm getting. This is what I'm doing anyway through editing and through many things that we can talk about. You quoted Hitchcock before, and I adore Hitchcock. Really, he's my preferred director of all, and I think North by Northwest is the best film of all times. But I think he's wrong in that with that quote that documentaries God is the director, because I think also in documentaries the director is God. You know, of course you have to work with what you get, but you create situations and you bring some expectations to the conversation or to the scene that you are witnessing, and then you have to deal with what comes, but you're also pushing people. You're also bringing people together, for instance, or you say, "Couldn't you do this for me?" And so there's a lot of direction already on this first level, and then of course there comes. So I always call it a wish list. I come with a wish list. I don't have a script, but I have a wish list of elements that I would like to have in this film, and I try to tick every line of my wish list, which sometimes is difficult. But then you also, and here maybe God comes into the picture, Hitchcock's God. Then you get something that you didn't expect. Something happens, and you have to deal with it, and then you have to be very alert and to seize that moment. Let me tell you how you shouldn't do it. I think you're a good interviewer, and my mother was a journalist, and she for a newspaper, and she had an author who always did interviews, and he did the worst interviews in the world. And his technique was, when the person he talked to would say something unexpected, he would say, "Oh, sorry, this is not what I asked you. We may talk about that later." And so when that happened, what every interviewer hopes, that his interviewee becomes lively and tells something unexpected, then he stopped them. And my mother always had to try to bring life back to those dead interviews. So this is how you shouldn't do it. But yeah, when these, and in film it's the same. When something unexpected happens, you have to recognize it and try to make something out of it. This project that I just mentioned, where I did interviews with musicians, it was a series of rehearsals in a very beautiful venue with a fantastic conductor, and I thought it could be interesting to film those rehearsals. And at some point in this, it was a symphony by Gustav Mahler, very long, difficult symphony. And at some point, by accident, one of the cameras showed a drummer, a lady, Spanish lady, very tiny lady, who was sitting next to those huge brass players. And there was this small, tiny Spanish lady, very concentrated on her drums and nicely hitting her drums. And we were observing her and thought, "Oh, she's really sweet in this context." And at some point, she has put her fingers in her ears because the brass players around her were so loud. And I thought, that's a lovely moment that can be it's not important for the film, but it can be a little charming moment. And now the next step is to work with this. So this is the gift that comes from God. And now here comes the director again. The next step was that I interviewed this lady. Then when we saw her before the rehearsal practicing in the corridor, we filmed her from distance. And then the afternoon, she sat at the cafeteria and had a cafe, and we filmed her again. So in the film, I haven't started editing it, but we will probably try to introduce her slowly as one line in the tapestry, so that when this moment comes, when she closes her ears because the music is so loud, we already know her, and then that will lead to an experience with a spectator, and this is a lot of directing and not just accepting what you get. Or it's a mix.
Correct. No, I think I wanted to actually double click on this thing, because recently, where I've joined newly as a head of design, I've been giving this example quite often about Hitchcock and say Tarantino, where I interviewed someone recently and or read some interview. No, in fact, with Rajat Kapoor, one of India's famous directors, and he said Alfred Hitchcock used to say that, "Oh, I have everything ready. The film is almost ready. I have to shoot it."
Yes.
which is
no,
kind
that's
of
true.
Yeah, which is kind of very different from a documentary style, where you are looking for those moments, and
Right.
so I wanted to just take this forward and ask that, now the Spanish lady, you like it's not in the script, you just found it. Now similarly,
Yes.
you can find many things. So how do you time box it? How do you decide? I know it's a very, very gray and creative area where you can't really have framework or principles or definition that I will keep this or not. I mean, that's where the magic is. But is there anything that qualifies, oh, we should put this or not? Or is it like the impulse of the director? Is it what's cooking there?
You have to be open. You have to have a sensibility for what you're getting, and I mean, I'm sure I missed many moments myself, but sometimes I see something, and then, as I told you with this Spanish lady, then I'm trying to write a script for around her, let's say. So it's really a mix of anticipation and reaction. And of course, Hitchcock is absolutely right for feature films and or for fictional films, and especially himself. I know that the American studios hated him, the producers hated him, because they couldn't edit his films in another way than he had shot them, because he didn't do the standard Hollywood coverage where you have every perspective from here, and from here, and so that you can edit 10 different films. He just had his shot list, and there was just one way to edit it, and so that gave him some power also on the termination and post-production process. And no, it's not like that in documentaries, but it's not total random either. So it's a mix of, as I said, a mix of anticipation, or what I call the wish list. It's really not a script. It's a wish list, and it's relatively open. And then those chance encounters, those happy moments that you get and that you should cherish.
Got it. Yeah. And then, so could you also a little bit tell about what's like you mentioned that you have a wish list. So in maybe pick an example, we can probably take dance or music. Music, I think I can relate more. So suppose you are documenting a musician. Can you tell us? Because I'm just digressing from the questions which I had. I'm I know where we are going. I'm liking that portion. So how does that wish list come about? Is it not just from research, but also your I mean, I wouldn't have any follow-up question, but you know what I mean.
Yes, let me think of a good example. I'm just thinking of the film that I'm doing right now. I'm not the one with the orchestra, but I'm doing a film on pianists, on piano playing, and with a Swiss pianist, a wonderful pianist, younger guy. I'm traveling to old pianists, some living legends, and we are trying to get their secret magical tricks, to find those tricks out. And so how is a typical moment? we visited French pianist, an old gentleman who was a successful pianist when he was young, and then he had some kind of religious vision, and he joined a monastery, and he was Jewish. Now he's Catholic, and he joined the monastery, and after some time he entirely stopped playing the piano, at least in public. And we visited him because his early recordings were so fantastic, but also because we were curious about how religious imagery changed his way of piano playing. So what would, in this case, have been the wish list? And it's interesting because in this case, it's not me who is talking to the gentleman, but it's my friend, the pianist, who's also in the picture. So it's more dialogue between colleagues, which is totally different than an standard interview situation. But of course, my friend is not an experienced filmmaker. He's a pianist. So he is not as good maybe as I am in asking questions, because he is too soon too happy. And he would say, yeah, of course, I understand, instead of letting the other person really speak. Yeah. And so sometimes I had to interfere and say, no, hold on. Let him explain it. You may understand it, but the audience may not. And I had some points on my wish list. The example is not good. I'm sorry, but it gives you a feeling for those kind of situations. So on my list, I want Monsieur Cars talk about this. I want him to talk about this, and I have to push the conversation and the situation there that he does it. And one very important detail on my wish list, I wanted him to play the piano, which he doesn't do anymore. So we had to find the right moment to ask him, sir, would you be so kind to give us a little example on the piano? We had already set him on the piano, so he knew that it might happen, even though as he said, I haven't played for a long time. So, and then he did it, and it was very moving. It was technically not perfect, but musically it was very profound. With all his history and with all his experience and with all these religious experiences that he had. So he played and he explained us what he saw during his playing. And that was got goosebumps, So elements on a wish list that you try to get. The order doesn't matter. All techniques are allowed to get to your goal.
I got the drift, I think, because Audiogan, after like 270 plus episodes, I think documenting is more about, you have some broad bullet points which you want to talk about, and then everything unfolds in the conversation itself. Is that a fair understanding?
Absolutely. No, really, you have to trust the flow of the conversation, and if you don't do that, then you miss it. But at some points, you have to get back to your script and say, yeah, but let's talk about this as well.
Correct. Yeah. Interesting. So I'll just take back to our conversation, which was like, then what qualifies to be a good documentary? Is there a parameter? Is there a aesthetic angle? I mean, yes, there is, but is it quantifiable? Are there... Because, for commercial success, you have some box office collections and stuff like that, right? For a documentary, how do you, is there any way to measure it's good, great?
Of course, there's also some kind of box office. And when your film has no viewers at all, that says something. And when it has a lot of viewers, it also says something. So it's not entirely detached. And but for me, it's a good documentary is a film that makes you experience something. I think that's the most important aspect, that you really experience whatever the director wants to show you, and not that you not only have a collection of facts that you digest and that you try to memorize, because facts in our time, I think in all times, but especially in our times, facts are not interesting anymore, because you get facts online in 1 minute through Wikipedia or whatever. So you don't need facts. Also, when I think of my film about Doshi, Doshi built 100 buildings or even more. And I think the best film about Doshi is not the one that shows most of his buildings, but the one who really conveys Doshi's spirit, let's say. And yeah, I call it an experience. So you have to find a way that the viewer really lives what you're trying to present to him. Yeah, that's for me the best film. And it doesn't matter what it's about. It doesn't need to be about an important person like B.V. Doshi. It can also be a film about some shepherd, or a film about, I don't know, a bee in the garden. If you do it in a compassionate way that really draws the audience into the film, it can be wonderful. And there are many examples of that kind.
But then how does one start? I mean, then the question is, what qualifies to be documented? Because even one day before, in fact, starting AudioGAN long time ago, I was just thinking, why don't I just interview, like have small snippets of my guard and security and watchmen of my building, and just like start there, right? So you can start anywhere. So like, what do you like? How do you arrive at a plot, a meta narrative, or what qualifies to be what qualifies to be documented?
It's the approach. It's what you plan to do. It's not the subject matter. It really can be any subject matter. I mean, it's a little bit more difficult to make a very thrilling film about a meadow, but I think I'm not able to do it, but I can imagine someone is around who could do it. So it's not the subject matter. It's the approach. It's the storyline that you have in mind. Your capacity to find a good structure, and to move people. I mean, if those guards of your house are very, very dull people, it might be difficult to do a compelling film with them. But maybe even then, it's possible. Yeah. You may find some moving aspect of the personality that you think, oh yeah, now I understand him. And
correct. And if I have to zoom out this and take at a much more bigger level, in a sense, not the kind of like, unfortunately I've not seen all your work, but whatever I have, if you remove that aspect and consider documentaries which are made by, say, BBC and other sort of productions where they're saying something which is like going beyond 500 years and thousands of years, and those kind of narratives, like how are those again thought with a subject? So this breaks, right, what you said just now, because there's no approach, there's a subject that which they want to say, and that's how we have been exposed to documentaries, at least.
Yes, well, historic documentaries are of course challenging because you don't have film documents that you can use. You don't have audio documents that you can use. So you have to find another way. You can have people who tell you, but that's a bit boring. You can try to reenact scenes. And I also do that sometimes. I'm not a big fan of reenactments, but sometimes I do it. It's difficult. And most examples that I see are done with bad taste, I would say. In this film on yoga that I did in India 15 years ago, I did some reenactments because in this film, it's about the father, let's say, of modern yoga, a very important person called Krishnamacharya, who lived in South India. And many branches of modern yoga are related to this person. And for instance, PKS Iyengar's yoga and Ashtanga yoga, what they call it, by Patabi Joyce and so on. And Krishnamacharya did yoga demonstrations when he was relatively young in Mysore for the Maharaja of Mysore. The Maharaja founded a yoga school, and that was the birthplace of modern yoga, I would say. And those demonstrations served to entertain the Maharaja and to get attraction to yoga, to popularize yoga. And I found that very interesting. They were like theater performances. and unfortunately there were no documents of those, not even photographs of those demonstrations. But I talked to many people who witnessed them, the youngest son of Krishnamacharya and other people. So I knew quite well what they might have looked like. So I reconstructed them. And I found some very good practitioners. We developed some kind of choreography that is also not authentic because there are no documents proving exactly what happened. But we had some, there are many scholars talking about this. So we did a choreography that might be more or less accurate, and had good practitioners, and then we looked for the right costumes, and all of that was feasible. And a person who could be this Krishnamacharya teacher, which was difficult because he was really a saintly person, so we couldn't take any guy. This guy needed to have some aura, but we found someone, and the outcome was so believable that almost no one who watched the film today thinks that this is done by me, but they all think it's an authentic historic document from the 1930s, which is flattering, but also a bit puzzling because, of course, I don't want to betray someone. I could have put a caption telling reconstruction or reenactment, but I didn't want to do that because this is destroying the flow of the film and the illusion. So it's a bit hard. And I also, which is also a bit, one thing that's a bit sad is there's no recognition for this work of reconstructing it because everyone thinks I just found it in some basement in Mysore. Yeah, so it's tricky with reenactments.
Correct. In fact, that leads me. So this part I'll conclude with two questions, and this is very, very close to my heart because you gave a nice example, and I found a good segue that can then documentaries be dangerous to society? You know what I mean?
I think for me, a good documentary is art, and I think art is always dangerous because you have a, let's say, potential existential experience when you confront yourself to work of art. It's really dangerous. One shouldn't forget that when one goes to a movie theater or to a concert or wherever, it can change your life, and this is happening, and you never know when. So, in that sense, I think documentaries are dangerous. Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Because when I interviewed Rajat Kapoor, the actor whom I spoke about, even he said that art, he didn't use the word dangerous, but he said that art has a power to move and change things, but not in a short term. If it's short term, then it's propaganda. But in a long term, if it changes things, it's definitely a powerful medium. Yeah.
That's very well put. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Cool. And like, because you have always been in documenting artists, like, don't you feel you're missing out the actual live moment rather than the technicalities, or you simulate, or I mean, because there are different ways of shooting, uh, it might happen that, like, because we'll follow up in that B.V. Doshi's interview where he's talking something and you're so deep into it that you forget to even switch on the camera. I mean, that could happen, right? So what's your like in the last few decades, how do you see which is more powerful, like just documenting without sort of an agenda and just let it unfold, or simulate certain situations? In fact, in both these, what becomes a powerful narrative also, or is it up to the directors?
There are those two options, of course, but before you do that, you have to decide to do it to a film at all. And I think this is already a way of missing out the real, or can be a way to missing the real experience. And this is a professional reflex that I'm also sometimes questioning when I see something that touches me, and then automatically almost, I think, oh, I should do a film about that. Instead of just enjoying it and relaxing and maybe trying to get another experience of that kind, always this reflects, yeah, I wanna capture this. How can I do this? And so this is in French you say déformation professionnelle, professional deformation of yourself. But on the other hand, what I'm trying, or what I think all artists are trying, they make a profound experience and they try to how can you say, to objectivate it and to bring it into some form that other people can experience that. So it's a way of sharing experiences, which is not bad. I mean, maybe my own experience is a bit diminished, but I can share it.
So it's more of absorbing. Yeah, I'm putting it very loosely, but it's more of absorbing that moment and then trying to recreate or trying to express so that it comes as close to reality as possible.
Yes, I mean the reality. It's an interesting trajectory. You start with reality, let's say, and as I said, it's already a reality that is also influenced by the director, because first of all, the camera is there changing the situation. Then I'm there telling people, couldn't you do this? Couldn't you do that? Couldn't you come here? Why don't we do the film all in my house? So please all come to my house. And this has not so much to do with reality anymore. And then there's this very, very artificial process of editing. And in editing, you put everything upside down and you really question every detail, and you listen to takes, or you're watching takes 100 times. And I tell you, you have the experience yourself, but when you listen, at some point when I was editing the film on B.V. Doshi, I knew him so well. It was like I could have written a book on one sentence by him, because I heard so many nuances after those months of editing and listening to these sentences again and again and again. And all of a sudden you notice, okay, maybe he's referring to this, and here's this very, very tiny laughter in this sentence, and here this sounds a bit ironic, and this sounds a bit sad, and why this word? And it's really like a mountain that you climb. And so you're working with this, and the whole process of editing consists of trying out things, putting back and forth and combining elements. And so this has very little to do with reality, with this first reality that you encountered on day one, let's say. But of course, the goal is to create something like a higher reality, or a purged reality, or a transcended reality at the end. I want people to say, yes, this is B.V. Doshi. This is even the best B.V. Doshi I've ever experienced. So, yeah, this is the trajectory.
Yeah. I think what we'll do is we'll conclude this episode, and we'll continue our conversation in the part 2, where I would like to talk about the promise B.V. Doshi, the architect, and we'll continue there. So, anything you want to just conclude with this topic of documentary, like your any learnings, observations as an art form?
Yeah, let me say one thing. It's a very inefficient way of storytelling. I think this is something people don't think of. Documentaries are long, and on a factual level, they're not necessarily convey that much. I give you an example. Last summer I went to a Greek island called Hydra. It's a very beautiful island, and Hydra has a particularity that I can tell you like this. the mayor of Hydra banned all plastic chairs and all Coca-Cola fridges and advertisement posters of his island, and that leads to a very homogeneous impression of the island. And I can also tell it like this. When I came to Hydra for the first time, or Hydra, I don't know how I got it, I came by boat, and I left the boat and walked down the pavement, and already the first bar at the harbor was so appealing somehow that I thought, oh, I want to sit there, I want to have a drink at this bar. And then I went on, and the next bar was even more beautiful. And I thought, what's going on here? Why is everything so beautiful? And then I noticed that there are no plastic chairs, that there are no posters, that there are no Coca-Cola fridges. And then I learned that the mayor of Hydra banned all these things, which was a very clever move of this gentleman. So, the second version is much longer, and yeah, it takes much more film time, let's say, but it leads to an experience because I share my experience. And that makes you, hopefully, see Hydra with my eyes. Whereas the first version, which is very short, gives you the facts. So you can write to a friend, I know in Hydra they don't have those ugly umbrellas. But that's not what it's about. A documentary should convey a real experience.
Beautiful. I think because I'm like into the digital world, we have something similar called as infographics, and then there is a good storytelling. I think infographics are, you get the facts and they are dissected on many axes and just shown in different formats for you to bring analogies and metaphors. But I think the human emotion and human perspective is missing in that. So yes. I think that one sentence can also make it beautiful, the entire graphic.
Yes, and in your science, I think redundancy is an important word. And so in the arts, you shouldn't avoid redundancy all the time. Some redundancy is very helpful for the experience.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. I think we'll conclude with this. Thanks a lot for giving your time. And I'll meet you in the second episode very soon. Thanks.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at AudioGyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.